I struggled with depression between September of 2017 to March of 2018. This would be the time period where I hit my all-time low. I also had the worst days of my life during this time period. But then, after depression ended, I hit a new time period. During this time period, the opposite occurred. I hit my all-time high, and overall, life was extremely great. So today, I'm going to talk about my life after struggling with depression. I'm Zach, and this is Storytime 20 on May 14th, 2021. So first off, I want to give a little bit of a disclaimer. While the actual Storytime portion will not have these themes, for the most part, the backstory will be focused around very dark topics such as depression, bullying, death threats, self-harm, and more. Since these are very sensitive topics, I want to go ahead and warn you if you are sensitive to these. If you are, then feel free to click off the video. Anyways, on to the backstory. So in August of 2017, I began the 8th grade. So this was probably the most challenging and overall most difficult school year I've ever had. In September of 2017, I started having depression. Depression would be as a result of being bullied at school, getting left out at school, getting into drama online, and even receiving death threats online and at school. So our school had a rule where you were only allowed to sit with the people in your second block at lunch. I had no friends in this class, but I did deal with some bullies. Nobody would let me sit at their table except the bullies. The bullies said and did atrocious things to me, so I was literally being forced to sit with them. In February of 2018, the bullies decided to sit at the tables that would not let me sit with them. So therefore, I was sitting alone at my own table in front of hundreds of students. Yeah, very embarrassing and overall made me even more depressed. Then around mid-February, I became suicidal. I was seriously considering ending it all, as it seemed like nobody really wanted me to exist and nobody really cared about me. So as a result, on March 8, 2018, I came up with the plan to commit suicide and even started the attempt. Fortunately, my science teacher overheard the threat and immediately reported it. Later that day, my mom took me to the mental hospital where I stayed for 5 days. This would be when depression would go away, specifically on Monday, March 12, 2018. So we were in a group therapy with our parents. My parents were a little bit late. For the previous nights, they were really serious during group therapy sessions. For this night, though, they were a little bit late, and therefore we weren't that serious. That night, we talked and cracked a few jokes. The only serious thing they mentioned were that my friends at school were really missing me and ready for me to come back. This talk really made me feel included and overall really happy. It's what I consider to be the end of the depression and the start of the best time period of my life. Now that we're done with the backstory, let's get on to the video. So this time period starts at the mental hospital, March 13th, 2018 to be exact. It was the day I was discharged from the mental hospital. My mom picked me up around lunch. That night before in our talk that got me out of depression, I referred to the food at the hospital as dog shit. I also had no vegetables my entire stay, so my mom took me to a Cracker Barrel that was about 5 minutes away. I ate a vegetable plate here, and it was probably the best meal I've ever had in my life. Mac and cheese, pinto beans, lima beans, and steamed broccoli. Afterwards, we went to my sister's school to pick her up early. She was extremely excited to see me, and so was I. They only allowed parents at the group therapy at the hospital, so I had not seen her in 5 days. We then went home and played some games. My dad then came home, and he was beyond thrilled to see me. We all played a couple games of Uno. Afterwards, I went to my room and watched The Big Bang Theory for a little bit. In fact, I actually fell asleep while watching it, as I was just that happy. So the first day of the post-depression period. The reason I don't consider the 12th to be the first day is simply because I was depressed throughout most of the day, as it wasn't until that night around 5:30 that depression ended, and also that the 13th was the first full day. That's why I consider it the beginning. So I want to discuss a few things that changed as a result of this whole fiasco. So first off, my parents took my phone, which I agree with. They looked through while I was at the mental hospital and actually found the death threat sent to me, which is how they found out that it wasn't just bullying at school. I would not have my phone for about a month, which I think was good for me. Another thing that changed was having mental therapy sessions. So I started going to the mental therapy sessions around after this event. From the first meeting on March 22nd, 2018 to around the end of freshman year, I talked to my therapist about every other Thursday. Then from the end of freshman year until the rise of the coronavirus pandemic, it was monthly. Then from the rise of coronavirus pandemic to now, it's about every couple months. I think these are great for me, and I think overall they've really helped me out a ton. One final change I want to mention was medication. So I was prescribed Zoloft while at the hospital. I thought I would have to take it forever. Turns out that was far from the truth. I actually stopped taking this medication about a month after starting junior year in September of 2020. I decided that I was in a much better place now, and I think that it would be finally time to stop taking the Zoloft. And I think it was a great decision, but that's junior year, so I'm not going to talk about junior year in this story time. So throughout this entire story time, I take Zoloft. So obviously, I did not go to school on that Tuesday when I was discharged. However, the next day, March 14th, 2018, I did go to school. It was my first day back from the hospital. So while I was at the hospital, my parents, teachers, and principal had a meeting to determine how to prevent this from happening in the future. They decided that they will switch my classes. So normally, I had English as my second block. We switched my schedule so that I would have English as my first block, then Science as my second block. Science was where I had a ton of friends. In fact, many of the people in that class saw that I was not there at school at lunch and asked my science teacher where I was. Of course, my science teacher didn't actually say where I was, as that would be rude, as she and my other teachers knew what happened and actually were the people who dealt with this situation. This is why I consider them to be the greatest teachers I've ever had. So instead, she just said that I was doing fine and everything would work out. And she'd be right. It did. My parents told me that this had happened that Monday, which is another reason I can stop being depressed, as I realized that yes, people cared about me. When I was depressed, I believed that nobody cared about me. In fact, this class would also ask why I was not at school in about 2 weeks. So to think not just a few people, but an entire 30 people class thought about me really made me more hopeful about the future. And it made me feel more secure. Now, I only had bullies in 3 classes, in algebra, PE, and in art. Really, the only issue was art. I would have my last PE class on March 28th, 2018, simply because of the situation of me being a dumbass. For algebra, I still had the class with the bullies. However, not only did my algebra teacher make sure the bullies were as far away from me as possible, but also I had quite a lot of friends in that class. Not only that, but my algebra teacher kept a close eye on the bullies so they wouldn't do any stupid shit. And it worked out perfectly. I'd say this is why my grade in algebra rose from a borderline B to an A, as I was more secure in the class, as well as just because this was when everything we discussed started clicking. Now I want to describe lunch. So now, I sat with all my friends. No longer was I sitting with any of the bullies. In fact, my second block had so many nice people and people who cared about me that actually wanted me to sit with them that I really could have sit with at any table, even with the popular kids. But I just chose my close friends, since they were special to me. I still often taught with the other kids, since all of them, and I mean all of them, were really nice. And remember, no teacher told them. The only people at school who knew about what happened were my teachers, my counselor, and my close friend Robbie. But that's about it. I'm still really thankful for not just my friends, but my entire second block in general for making the rest of 8th grade an absolute masterpiece. Anyways, life was great. Let's jump to about 2 weeks later, on March 28th, 2018. So I used to swim competitively during this time, although I stopped in March of 2019, which I'll explain more next video. So we had just finished a short course season, which is where we did meets in 25-yard pools. So to celebrate, our team held a party, but right beside the pool, there was a tennis court. A couple of my friends were at the tennis court, so I walked over there. I told them that I was going to jump over the net. Yeah, as smart as I am, definitely not a smart idea. My shoes tripped over the net, and I landed on the concrete on my arms. We went to the emergency room that night, and it was revealed that I broke both of my arms. My left arm was completely shattered, but my right arm had only minor scratches. So for about 5 days, I wore 2 splints. What's funny is that I only missed 1 day of school, as the next day was our last day of school before spring break. That Monday, on April 2nd, 2018, we went to Charlotte to see a doctor. He determined that my right arm didn't need a splint, but my left arm would need surgery. He also wrapped my left arm in a much better splint than the emergency room did. And thank God, because I was about to get blisters on my arms because of how poorly the emergency room wrapped my arms. So the surgery was on Wednesday, April 4th, 2018. It went really well. They put some wires on my left arm. Of course, this meant that for now, I would have a pretty big scar on my left arm. They said that it would last a lifetime. So far, they're right. I was 13 when I got the surgery. I'm now almost 17, and it's still there. They also put on a new splint, which was even more comfortable than the old one, surprisingly. I then want to talk about Friday, April 6, 2018. This was such a great day. So this day was the day that I got my phone back. The reason was because the week prior, my mental therapist actually recommended my parents that I should receive my phone back, as it was unhealthy for me to be alone in a room with 2 broken arms without access to the outside world. I agreed with her recommendation, as I think it was better for me mentally to have my phone and talk to friends. Anyways, the real reason why this day was so good was that night. So one of my best friends is named Aki. Not his actual name, but that's what I'm going to call him for story time. Anyways, Aki was a friend from swim, so he and his parents came over that day and hung out. Me and Aki were doing some stupid thing on the computer, and our parents talked. Aki and his parents did leave me with some food. It might not sound like much, but for me, it meant a lot. Like, I believe they got me some goldfish, some peanuts, and that's all I ever can really remember. I ended up staying up to like 3 in the morning that night eating. It was a great night. And I'm very thankful for Aki's parents. So now let's jump back to March 29th, 2018. This was the day that after I broke both of my arms, and the only day I missed because of my arms. So remember when I said that my new second block was super friendly and really liked me? Well, this is another situation that really proves it. So my mom emailed my teachers that night, letting them know what happened. So a lot of the students in my second block were wondering where I was at, as they were very concerned about me. So my science teacher told them, as well as the whole class, what had happened, since the entire class was also wondering. So nobody was really surprised when I came to school after spring break in a splint. My first day of school in a splint was April 9th. I, of course, got a lot of attention from a lot of people, even some girls as well. So yeah, it actually wasn't all that bad. That morning before second block, I also had a little talk with my science teacher. I had these with her most days before second block. It was really just for her to know I was alright, as we don't want any more March 8th bullshit to happen again. I also love these, as it also helped me understand that yes, my teachers care about me. This also meant that for the rest of the school year, I got out of PE. Our PE teachers were bad. The boys were their favorite students, so getting out of this class felt amazing. I'd spend PE for now in my algebra teacher's room, and that would be for the whole year. So now I want to jump to that Friday, being April 13th. So this day was extremely eventful, but eventful in a great way. So for school, we had a dodgeball tournament between each of the 3 8th grade teams. I was a rocket, by the way. So literally every boy on our team signed up for this except me, because I glaringly couldn't. It kind of started a meme across our team. All the boys wanted to play dodgeball, and then there's me who probably would have signed up, but I couldn't. I mean, come on. How the hell do you expect someone with a broken arm to throw a 75-mile-per-hour ball? But I just cheered on our team. It was funny though. I basically said every cuss word in the book when cheering on our team. Mostly me cussing out other teams. Really funny since nobody except me and my friends heard it. But it actually did help. Our team won. So I guess to win dodgeball, you just need to drop a few F-bombs on the enemy team and you win. Got it. Now, the next thing I want to mention is that after school, I had another mental therapy session. Like most mental therapy sessions, I really don't remember that much. I mean, I do remember the last one we had, which was back in March 26, 2021, but that's the only one I remember. But I mean, it's been 3 years. How do you expect me to remember this one in particular? Now let's go to the most important thing about this day, D Now. So this was a 3-day church event where we had like 14 other churches do. It's basically where you learn about God, how to live like a Christian, Bible stories, that stuff. This event, more specifically this night, was absolutely legendary. So my mom ordered me McDonald's before going there, which I ate while waiting for the event to start. I also should note that a lot of my friends from school also went to my church, which was great. In fact, one of my friends, who was from second block, actually waited outside and helped me with my suitcase since I couldn't carry it due to my arm. So he helped me with that, and then I ate my McDonald's while waiting for it to start. So that night, when it started, wow, it was incredible. I can't remember, but I believe I got to go on stage that night after being picked by the announcer thing or whoever you want to call them. We played a game. Despite the odds being completely against me, I won. I managed to win a book. I don't think I read it, but it was still really cool that I won a prize, especially with a broken arm too. That night we would spend the night with all the people in our grade. So I was with all of the 8th grade boys. It was great, as I was friends with everyone. The use of was is important, as I'm no longer friends with them, which I'll discuss briefly later on. But anyways, it was really cool being with these friends. I should note that yes, almost all of these boys were also in my second block, so that's a score too. So I'm not going to mention the rest of D Now since I already did a video on it, but I will mention that in the span of just 2.5 weeks, I went from making my worst decision to my best. So that Saturday night, on April 14th, 2018, I got saved. Yeah, decided to give my life to Christ. Best decision ever, and still is. Nothing will ever be a better decision than that. In about a month, I'd get baptized, which I'll explain in a bit. So let's jump to that Thursday, April 19th. So I went to the doctor's office that day, and my doctor said I didn't need a splint anymore. In fact, I didn't even need a cast. Instead, I needed physical therapy. So that's what I did starting May, and finished at the end of May. Physical therapy was actually really easy. I got almost all of my strength on my left arm. I was not able to get all of my strength back, as I still haven't got it back even 3 years later, but I still regained much of my strength. Physical therapy was overall really easy. I just do the exercise with my left arm and then I would be playing Clash Royale on my right arm. Yeah, that's literally how it worked, and it worked out great. So now, for the rest of April, it really was uneventful. So let's move on to May. So as stated before, I did physical therapy, but at the very beginning of May, I went to Wilmington for a school trip. Wilmington is a coastal city on the North Carolina coast. It was a great trip, but when I got back, holy shit was I thrilled to receive this letter. So in February, I applied to go to early college. This school would allow me to graduate high school and get an associate's degree for free when I graduated high school. So not everyone gets in, maybe around 40% of applicants, but the letter said that I got accepted. I'm now a rising senior at early college, and I can safely say that this decision was worth it. It's such a great program and will really benefit me whenever I go to college. This would mean that I would be abandoning my old friends in second block, but it still was worth it. Now let's talk about a week later. So May 13th, 2018, it was Mother's Day, but also the day I got baptized. So this experience was absolutely incredible. I was a little nervous, but really excited. And it happened like that. What a great experience it was. And yeah, I kind of don't remember too much from it. Now let's talk about exams. So our state does a thing called EOCs, or end of grade test, or EOGs. They also do EOCs, or end of course tests, for high school. Why do I mention both? Well, I took both. So, I took an EOG for English and Science, but I also took an EOC for Algebra, as it was a high school course. I managed to do very well on my English EOG, I believe an almost perfect score on my Science, and an A on my Algebra EOC. This mostly came from simply getting a lot of support from my teachers, and because everything was coming easier now since I wasn't depressed anymore. So now I want to discuss the end of 8th grade. The last day of school was on June 8th, 2018. Wow, such a chaotic and extremely challenging school year, but also a very rewarding school year too, finally coming to an end. So this obviously was my last day of middle school. Thank God. I'm ready for high school. So on the last day, we had an award ceremony. So in the fall of 2017, I took 9th grade world history. One day, I didn't bring a book. My teacher then proceeded to give an entire lecture to the class about why you should come prepared. He then said that I was not going to be successful if I didn't come prepared. Well, needless to say that I got the final laugh in this matter, as I won the award for making the highest graded world history. Ha! Take that! I'm your top student. Don't give me that come prepared bullshit. Now I'm done with it. I finished 8th grade. It was time to just relax and enjoy the summer, as early college started earlier than other schools. This summer of 2018 overall was an excellent summer, and I'd kill to go back to this summer. However, now I want to discuss the only bad thing from the post-depression period. So you might think that breaking my arms was bad, but I actually don't consider it a bad thing. I got out of PE and got a lot of attention, so in the end, it worked out well. However, there was one event that really turned out to negatively affect me then, as well as even now. I won't discuss it too much, as I explained it in Storytime 16 about a month ago. So this was Fuge. It lasted from June 18th to June 23rd, 2018. My 14th birthday was on the 21st, so it's already not looking very hot. So Fuge was a 6-day church event. I thought I was going to have a blast, being with everyone from D Now and a lot of students from second block. Turns out, I learned that these people were fakes after getting left out on the trip. Yeah, it was not pretty. This is probably the main reason I don't talk to anyone at church much, as I just don't really trust anyone. Really my grade. I mean, I don't mind people outside my grade, but like in my grade, no, I don't trust them. But alas, Fuge wasn't really that bad. We had site groups where we did stuff for the community of Nashville, Tennessee. These site groups could be with any church. In fact, everyone in my site group was not just from a different church, but also a different state. Not just that, but if you talk about how nice everyone was in second block and multiply it by like 5,000, that's how nice they were. Yeah, nicest people I've ever met. My birthday was obviously a disaster, but I didn't plan on celebrating it until the 23rd. And while my church disagreed, I still wanted to celebrate on the 23rd. So I did that when I got back home that night. That night, on June 23rd, 2018, I will never forget. That night was incredible. So my dad grilled some hamburgers and fixed some fries. We sat outside by the pool to eat. After we did our family dinner, I then went inside and opened my presents on my bed. I got some money, a game, an iTunes gift card, and some clothes. So for the rest of the night, until like 2, I was playing BTD6, which I bought with that iTunes money, while eating Doritos. Now that Fuge is done, I could truly start my summer, so I actually didn't do much this summer. I mostly laid around playing Clash Royale, Clash of Clans, BTD6, and Pokemon while laying around listening to music. However, I do want to briefly mention June 25th, 2018. I won't mention it much since I talked about it last video, but that would be when I came back to swimming competitively after being out for 3 months because of my arm. It felt great, but then you know that the story about my coach being a dick, so I won't talk about that. Plus, let's stay positive. So for swim, I only attended like 2, sometimes only 1 practice a week during the summer. I think this also caused me to have an amazing summer. So let's jump to mid-July. Me and my family went on a beach trip to North Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. It was a great trip. I don't remember much from it, but I do remember it being fun. Now that we're done with the beach trip, I can finally relax some. But then in very early August, in fact, the weekend right before I started school, we actually went to Cincinnati to visit the recreation of Noah's Ark. It was really cool and very fun, but honestly kind of forgettable. Now let's talk about my first day of high school at early college on August 6th, 2018. So this day was great. It was only us new freshmen who attended the school that day. They introduced us to everything. We also got the chance to meet others. I didn't meet anyone new though on this day, but that Friday I would. So that Friday, August 10th, 2018, such an awesome day. So on this day, our school took us freshmen to go rock climbing. This day was so fun. So the purpose of this trip was to get to know each other better, and I've got to say, it did a really good job. I met 4 new friends on that trip. I already discussed who they were in Storytime 6, so once again, I won't mention it again. But anyways, this trip definitely helped me meet people. I also remember that on our way back, we stopped at Golden Corral. Michael, one of the friends I met, brought two gummy bears with him on the bus. He did literally treated these things like freaking Skylanders and swapped their bodies. It was pretty stupid, but really funny as well. I also remember that everyone was exhausted after this trip. Like, I believe me and Michael were the only 2 boys who stayed awake on this bus ride back. But yeah, overall, all of us freshmen had a very great time. So now there really aren't any more significant parts about the post-depression period I can think of. I mean, sure, in September, me and my English teacher started to get into fights about every day, but like, that isn't really significant to the post-depression period. So we talk about how it ended. So I really am not too sure on the specific date that the post-depression period ended. In my story time on 8th grade, I mentioned that it ended in either October or December. I'd say that to stay in the middle, the post-depression period probably ended in November of 2018. It ended due to not only the fights between me and my English teacher getting more severe, but also because of swimming. Starting in September, my interest in swimming started to drop, mostly due to how my coach treated me and how he did stuff. I also began getting into a lot of fights with my parents during this time, so that's why I think the post-depression period ended in probably around November 2018. So now I'm going to summarize my life after depression. So after going through the toughest and most challenging point in my life, I began an approximately 8-month time period where I reached my all-time high in terms of happiness. I commonly refer to this as the post-depression period, part 1. During this time, great things happened to me left and right, but like all good things, this good thing had to come to an end around November of 2018. But while it lasted, it was a great time period and I wish I could return to it. But I did return to it. Yup, I actually have another time period very similar to this time period. I call it the post-depression period, part 2. I referred to everything mentioned in this video, part 1. Part 2 took place from March 23rd, 2019, all the way to March 15th, 2020. So a lot longer than part 1. But honestly, I prefer to go back to part 1. But I still love this time period, so much so that I'll be discussing it next Friday. So that's all I got for today's video. Next week, on May 21st, 2021, I'll be discussing Life After Depression Part 2. Anyways, that's all I got for this video, and I'll see you guys next week. Bye!